In the ancient legends of China, whether it was the dragon horse carrying the map or the divine tortoise bearing the writing, both were understood as signs manifested by heaven. People saw these signs, drew inspiration from them, and came to understand nature and recognize themselves. This is the distinctive Chinese idea of the unity of heaven and humanity. Why, then, do the Chinese not worship gods and spirits in the same way, but instead hold heaven in reverence? And what do the ancient classics really mean when they speak of sages? Professor Tsang Xiaxiang of National Taiwan Normal University will guide us in appreciating the wisdom of the I Ching. Please stay with us for episode 3, Unity of Heaven and Humanity in Virtue. It seems that only in Chinese culture do people especially like to speak of the unity of heaven and humanity. People in other cultures may not quite believe that heaven and humanity can be unified, because human beings are so small, while heaven is so vast and high above. How could the two be united? We also call the I Ching the learning of heaven and humanity. What is the reasoning behind this? Think about it. Before human language was fully developed, and before written texts appeared, people were already curious about the world around them. They wanted very much to understand why things changed as they did. This is what we now call scholarship. But without texts, and with language still inadequate, how could people pursue learning? The answer is actually very simple. Heaven manifests phenomena. Heaven does not speak, but it displays phenomena for everyone to observe. Each person then understands them in their own way. This is why people's interpretations differ, because their powers of understanding are different. Heaven has never stopped manifesting phenomena. The pity is that we have become less and less sensitive to them. We tend to say they are merely science, merely natural phenomena, and we no longer reflect deeply on what heaven may be saying. The Zhizi, or appended remarks, states this very clearly. Heaven manifests phenomena, revealing good fortune and misfortune. As soon as heaven manifests phenomena, good fortune and misfortune are revealed. Ordinary people cannot understand this, but the sage observes these phenomena. The sage imitates the natural patterns of heaven and then draws out certain principles. There is another familiar saying, "The yellow river brought forth the map, the low river brought forth the writing, and the sages followed them." Whether we say that heaven manifests phenomena and the sages observe them, or that the He Tu and Luo Shu descended from heaven and the sages imitated them, is this not all the unity of heaven and humanity? Is this not the learning of heaven and humanity? Of course, one may choose not to believe this, but look at the Japanese. The Japanese believe in it very strongly. They have already dug enormous underground vaults in Japan and buried a great deal of modern equipment inside them. They are preparing for a day when Japan is completely submerged by seawater, the people have fled, and tens of millions of years pass. Because the Earth's crust is constantly shifting. Japan rises again. People come to live there again, and they begin to excavate. They dig up many things they cannot understand. Would that not be the Japanese version of the He Tu and Luo Shu? In the Jishi chapter of the Analects, Confucius says, "The gentleman stands in awe of 3 things. He stands in awe of the decrees of heaven, in awe of great persons, and in awe of the words of the sages." When I was young and read this passage, I had no question about standing in awe of the decrees of heaven, because heaven has always been deeply worthy of reverence in Chinese culture. I also had no question about standing in awe of great persons, because from childhood one naturally feels a certain awe toward elders. But as for the third point, standing in awe of the words of the sages, I was dismissive at the time. What is so remarkable about sages? Why should I stand in awe of what they say? At that time, I was very young, and I had not realized that if Confucius himself said these words, the meaning is entirely different. He was earnestly and patiently saying, "I am not a sage." Confucius never regarded himself as a sage, but he was saying that we should all stand in awe of the words of the sages. The implication is clear. Heaven manifests phenomena, but only the sages can perceive their meaning. Ordinary people cannot. Everyone sees the phenomena, but those who are eating continue eating, those who are dancing continue dancing, and those who are playing mahjong continue playing mahjong. They remain unmoved. It is still the same today. We have always assumed that the sage refers to Confucius. Yet Confucius himself says the gentleman stands in awe of three things: the decrees of heaven, great persons, and the words of the sages. This shows that the sages Confucius refers to are someone else entirely. The sages he speaks of are Fuji and King Wen of Zhou. In his time, Fuji looked upward to observe the phenomena of heaven and looked downward to examine the patterns of the earth. He used what was within himself to respond to the phenomena of heaven and the patterns of the earth, and in this way he drew the 8 trigrams. This shows that the 8 trigrams begin from the phenomena of heaven, but are drawn by human beings. This too is called the learning of heaven and humanity, because it shows that heaven and humanity are unified. But at that time, because there were no written texts, there was no way to explain what was happening. One might look around, draw the 8 trigrams, and still not know exactly what it all meant. King Wen of Zhou's greatest contribution was to bring Fuji's way of heaven into the way of humanity. He doubled the 8 trigrams to form the 64 hexagrams, and gave each hexagram a statement. His purpose was clear. The most important matter for human beings is governance. As long as governance is not enlightened, it is as Confucius said, "The phoenix does not arrive, the yellow river does not bring forth the map, and no one can do anything." At that time, during the Shang dynasty, people were highly superstitious, and belief in ghosts and spirits was extremely strong. That is why, in the I Ching, we often see references to spirits, ghosts, and ritual offerings. These may look like superstitious expressions, but we should reflect on them carefully. Confucius lived long after King Wen of Zhou, and ideas about spirits and ghosts had gradually faded. Confucius saw this opportunity and made a firm decision. It was not enough to transform the way of heaven into the way of humanity. He went further and thoroughly transformed the entire I Ching into rules of conduct for human life. So when we speak today about the rules for being a person and handling affairs, this is Confucius's greatest contribution to humanity. By the time the I Ching reached Confucius, it had already become a set of principles we can consult every day and use throughout our lives. It no longer relied on using the way of gods to establish teachings, but used reasoned argument to promote moral instruction. This is why calling Confucius the teacher of 10,000 generations is not excessive in the least. The pity is that today we know only that he is the teacher of 10,000 generations and the one who synthesized all that came before, without fully understanding his true intention. He was telling us, how can heaven and humanity be unified? Only through ethics and morality. Nothing else can bring them together. So in the Wenyan commentary on the Qian hexagram, he wrote with particular clarity, "What is a great person? A great person is someone whose every action follows conscience and therefore aligns with the way of heaven." The word for virtue here is pronounced the same as the word for obtaining. That is, when you walk the way and gain something from it, you are conforming to the way. On one hand, you have virtue. On the other, you obtain something. Both meanings are contained in the same word. By the time the entire I Ching reached Confucius, he was saying one thing above all. To be a person, the most important thing is to cultivate virtue. What does it mean to cultivate virtue? It means correcting and refining one's own character. It means cultivating oneself. Every day, you work on yourself and polish yourself until you come into accord with the way of heaven. This is the greatest goal in life and the greatest achievement. The most important and reliable thing in life is self-cultivation. Self-cultivation is the fundamental practice we must carry out throughout our lives. In this way, we grasp the deepest core of the I Ching. Confucius says that the greatest achievement of a person's life is expressed in these words: precede heaven, and heaven will not oppose. What does it mean to precede heaven? It means that what you say comes before heaven manifests phenomena. The phenomenon has not yet appeared, yet you have already spoken. Today we would call such a person a prophet, but today's prophets are wrong far more often than they are right. This comes down to their own level of cultivation. If you make a prophecy and heaven cooperates with you, you are right. If heaven does not cooperate, you make a fool of yourself. What, then, about following heaven? You say that the day after tomorrow will be bright and sunny. Heaven hears this and decides, I will make it rain instead, and so it rains. So why do some people's words prove true while others do not? It is because we have not understood this saying. Precede heaven, and heaven will not oppose, means that you have the ability to describe the future before heaven manifests phenomena. Heaven may not originally have intended things that way, but then it thinks, since you have said it, let it be as you say. Heaven then cooperates with you. That is the unity of heaven and humanity. But if you follow heaven, you must obey its timing. Heaven respects you, and you must also respect heaven. If you have not yet spoken, and heaven has already manifested phenomena, then you must not go against heaven. You must follow heaven, obey its timing, and act according to heaven's indications. From Confucius's time down to the present, this understanding of life has become one of the deepest convictions in Chinese culture. The pity is that today we talk about concepts, convictions, and all kinds of other things, while pushing this one far away. But there is a problem here. Confucius put forward the idea of preceding heaven without heaven opposing, and following heaven by obeying its timing, as a warning to people to cultivate virtue in order to respond to heaven. It is also the basic expression of the unity of heaven and humanity. Yet under the influence of this idea, a widespread trait has also developed, one that has brought great influence and difficulty to Chinese society. What trait is this? It is that everyone hopes to be the one who has the final say. This is a problem. Each of us carries something of an emperor's mentality, and there is no need to avoid saying so. Everyone who hears of Yao and Shun says, Yao and Shun were wonderful. I want to be like Yao and Shun. But they do not realize that Yao and Shun moved heaven and earth through virtue, not through power and force. Then, when they see someone become emperor, they say, being emperor is wonderful. You can do whatever you like. I want to be emperor. That is entirely wrong. If you believe that a person of virtue is the one who has the final say, and you also want to cultivate your virtue in the hope that one day you too may have the final say, that is the right path. But if you think being emperor is impressive, that it means you can do as you please, and you try by every means to push yourself into that position, then you are wrong. That is not in accord with the way of heaven. This is why we understand that great positions are determined by heaven. They are not obtained by cunning. The great position is the position of the one who has the final say. That person is chosen by heaven, not elected by people casting votes one by one. No matter how hard you try to force your way into a great position, if heaven does not agree, you are powerless. Is this superstition? Actually, It is not, but many people, when they hear this reasoning, quietly come to me and ask, does that mean that if I want to become a general manager, heaven must also decide that? I say, is a general manager really that significant? You see, everyone thinks too highly of themselves. You think a general manager is very important, but heaven looks around and sees general managers everywhere. What does that make you? So great positions are determined by heaven, and the word great means something truly immense before it qualifies as great. Do not tell yourself that you are already very great. Do not think that way. For each of us, to be the one who has the final say in small matters is already remarkable. To gradually have the final say in somewhat larger matters should be more than enough. As for the very greatest matters, the matters we call as great as heaven, it is still for heaven to choose that person. That person is heaven's representative, and that person has the final say. We should not contend for that position. This is what it means for a person who has studied the I Ching to make a proper arrangement for their own place in life. Why is Confucius called the one who synthesized all that came before? It is because by the time the I Ching reached him, everything had been said, and those who came after had nothing left to add. Mencius read Confucius's writings and said that Confucius was truly the sage of timeliness. That is, Confucius was able to observe the changes of the age and turn the I Ching in the right direction at the right moment. He set aside the method of using the way of gods to establish teachings and stated directly that these are rules of conduct for human life. His grasp of timing was exceptionally good. But we must understand that Confucius stated clearly, he transmitted but did not create, and he trusted in and loved antiquity. To trust in and love antiquity means that he understood the original intention of the ancient Fuji. To transmit but not create means that he only explained the original face of the I Ching. He did not add his own opinions, and he did not create anything new. He understood very well that the I Ching began with heaven manifesting phenomena. Then, through Fuji's first drawing that opened heaven, 4 words were understood: the principles of heaven and the conscience of humanity. The principles of heaven represent heaven, and the conscience of humanity represents humanity. In this way, heaven and humanity are unified. When the principles of heaven and the human heart are brought together, this is called ethics and morality. That is why it is called unity of heaven and humanity in virtue. All the phenomena of the universe display a kind of natural responsibility. Has the sun ever said that you owe it an electricity bill? No. When the sun rises, it simply rises. Water flows without ceasing. The flow of water actually has a purpose. Through the process of flowing, it purifies many impurities. Otherwise, if people are washing clothes upstream, how could people downstream drink the water? What we now do, based on the purifying process of flowing water, is make water purifiers. Once you understand science clearly, you will see that all of it operates according to the principles of the I Ching. The progress and development of science increasingly prove that the ancient I Ching contains principles that remain constant throughout all ages. And the most fundamental principle of the I Ching is unity of heaven and humanity in virtue. But if the I Ching contains such wisdom for human life, when and why did it move away from our daily lives? Actually, the decline of the I Ching began as early as the Han Dynasty. Why? Because whatever reaches its peak must decline. Even the I Ching itself cannot escape this principle. When the first emperor of Qin burned the books, why did he spare the I Ching? Because everyone said, "Do not burn this book. Ordinary people use it for divination." The first emperor of Qin heard this and said, "Very well, then do not burn it." Was this a good thing? The answer still follows the principle of the I Ching. There was both good and bad. The good was that the book was preserved. The bad was that from then on, people once again regarded the I Ching simply as a book for divination. So from the Han Dynasty onward, the study of images and numbers flourished, along with a strong interest in disasters and anomalies. Once the study of images and numbers became popular, it pulled the I Ching away from its moral character and back into being a body of technical knowledge. This is truly troubling. Seeking good fortune and avoiding misfortune gradually became the focus of I Ching studies. Is seeking good fortune and avoiding misfortune a good thing? A person whose mind is entirely occupied with seeking good fortune and avoiding misfortune can very easily become opportunistic and crafty. Before doing something, if the divination is unfavorable, they do not do it. If the divination is favorable, they go ahead. Is that not opportunistic and crafty? I only do what benefits me, and I do not do what does not benefit me. This has already strayed far from Confucius's principles. What morality is left to speak of? Confucius says, "What you ought to do, even if there are great difficulties, you must overcome them step by step. What you ought to do, even if the outcome may be very grim, you should think it over. And if it ought to be done, you should still go and do it." That is correct, because when a person's virtue is truly good, misfortune can transform into good fortune, and good fortune can transform into misfortune. We have already discussed this. Precede heaven, and heaven will not oppose. This is what it means to be a truly great person. Of course, you may say, "I am not a great person. I am an ordinary person, so I still believe in divination." That is fine. We do not oppose it. We only say this: a person who is very skilled at calculation is called a divine calculator. How divine? Divine enough to be 70% accurate. That is already very high, is it not? You cannot be 100% accurate. If you were 100% accurate, would heaven still have any meaning? So you say this person is very accurate, 70 or 80% accurate, truly remarkable. But what if your particular matter happens to fall within the 30% that is inaccurate? Would you not be very unlucky? We will say only this much. Everything else is for each of you to choose for yourselves. Thank you all.